Have they just given up? Have they just stopped monitoring the logging of native forests in New South Wales? Could they not be bothered? Is it not convenient for stakeholders in the logging industry? Is it not convenient for party donors? Now, the New South Wales budget has stripped funding from the very organisations which have been monitoring logging of old-growth forests. Of course, then there's the Great Koala National Park, the great promise of the Great Koala National Park, which was supposed to protect large swathes of pristine forests from logging. Now, it seems they've set up, we don't know because there's such government secrecy shrouding this whole sector, but it seems instead of just setting up this Great Koala National Park, they've actually set up 106 koala hubs in the Great National Park, which would be spared from logging. Ecologists who've done the work on this show that these koala hubs amount to just 8,400 hectares, or 5% of the total of the Great Koala National Park, or the Great Promised Koala National Park. Now, we're not even told where the hubs are. The New South Wales Minister, Penny Sharp, is not even saying where they are, refusing to divulge any information. Such is the secrecy. And how about this State of the Forest report, which was meant to be a regular thing every 3 or 4 years? Well, the last one was in 2018, before the Great Bushfires, before the latest logging spree, before condemnation from international scientists aghast at these large tracts being felled, not just single trees here and there, but entire systems wiped out. Indeed, in 2018, this latest State of the Forests report was before the Great Koala National Park, or the promise thereof. Our forestry reporter, Sue Arnold, a veteran journalist of decades of experience, has requested access to the members of the Montreal Process Working Group, the MPG. It's an international mob which meets in Sydney next week to work out how sustainability in forests is going, to check out the monitoring or lack of, to check out if Australia's adhering to its latest stated principles. They're big on principles, not so big on action. This is what Sue got in response from the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries when she wanted to turn up and interview some people. Unfortunately, we will have to decline interviews in this instance. Terribly unfortunate, of course. They don't want journalists getting any word from international scientists that logging is out of control in this state. Victoria's done a better job. They put a sunset on the industry there. Whether they adhere to it is yet to be seen. Queensland, they call ground zero. Logging's totally out of control, but that's more due to massive urbanisation than simple forestry practices in isolation. And of course, in Tasmania, which was ground zero for the environment movement, to save the forests down there, they've begun to log old-growth forests in the Tarkine region again. Federally, Environment Minister Tanya Plibersek has been removing the koala referral guidelines, replacing them with a weaker and far more complex system. Again, dependent on self-referral, she's actually managed to water down ScoMo's koala policy, if you can believe that. Sue's covered this too, and covered the Nature Repair Market Bill to establish a voluntary credit market for biodiversity credits. They always have such nice names, these bills, these programs, names which suggest the impression of activity, the intention of action. The words voluntary market for biodiversity credits gives it away though. It's like with coal and gas. Don't bother stopping new fossil fuel projects. That'll affect our donors. Just set up a complicated market for carbon credits and carbon offsets. And so we have in forestry biodiversity offsets. I wonder who's monitoring that one. This is code for sort of co-regulation or industry regulation, which is part of the sort of philosophical program of both major parties around the country. Privatise the thing. Leave it up to industry to find the best solution. And indeed, in New South Wales, this is the tenor of the political response. To say the right things, but privatise the job of government to industry. They've done it in a typically sneaky political way. They've redirected funding, that is. According to Sue Arnold, in June this year, the New South Wales government rejected renewing funding for the Forest Management Improvement Program, which essentially monitored state-approved native forestry operations and federal regional forest agreements. The Natural Resources Commission, the NRC, had been charged with responsibility for the program by the last state premier, Gladys Berejiklian. The NRC was charged with developing and overseeing 20-year monitoring, evaluation, reporting plans for regional forest agreements. So who is now doing the reporting then? When asked how the state native forestry operations would be monitored if the September budget failed to restore funding, which it did a few days ago, the politician said that responsibilities for monitoring would be split up between agencies using their current budgets. These agencies are likely to be staffed from the Forestry Corporation of New South Wales, that's the poachers regulating themselves, from the New South Wales Environment Protection Authority, not famous for protecting the environment, for the Department of Primary Industries and the Department of Planning and Environment as well. So in other words, let's not increase funding. Let's not have a central independent body doing it. Let's just let the poachers look after the poachers themselves and have an honorary self-reporting function, an honourable self-reporting function. The Forestry Corporation actually drives the industry, basically using out-of-date scientific research to support its operations, just forgetting about whole ranges of endangered species in their science. Things have come nowhere in 20 or 30 years. When I was a young reporter on the AFR and the Sydney Morning Herald back in the day, I'd cover the building materials companies, Boral AGM at the Wentworth Hotel. You'd have these massive logging trucks, these blockades, humongous old-growth forest logs there, and the reporters and the investors going to the annual general meeting would have to pick their way through all the environmentalists, all the protesters. None of these stocks are listed anymore. Even back in the day, the reporting would just cover whether the dividends were up or down or what the return on investment was. They'd completely ignore all the people that were blockading the company outside. Total disconnect then. But there was some coverage, and now it's all paywalled. You know, the SMH hops out and does a bit here and there, buries it deep within its paywall. The rest is just, the tenor of the reporting is that protesters are annoying and should not be holding up development and progress. So if there's any news coverage, the protester is made out to be the person doing the wrong thing by holding up industry and progress. Meanwhile, any fuss that the mainstream media is making is very much paywalled, so we don't get to see much of it, and it doesn't get followed up much. ABC has a bit of a throw occasionally, but not much. And so it's left to regional protesters to occasionally get a bait on the national news in the evening for being annoying and holding up development. There are some legal challenges afoot from environmental groups, and legal challenges can have a real impact on this collapse of forest management. But we won't hear too much about them either because of the way the media is structured now. There is theoretically, to be fair, some value in having a sort of privatised biodiversity credits market, a self-reporting regime, if people stick to it, because that regime will put a price on the ecosystem. That will put a price on these vast tracts of land which are going to be logged. But what's the point when there's so much secrecy and lack of monitoring and such a refusal to even deal with the media on the hot button issues? What's the point when there's a compliant media, nobody watching? What's the point when it's not in the national accounts anyway? So you ascribe a secret value to it, but it's not in the national accounts. There is no economic value given to it anywhere. Point is, there is no point. Thank you very much for supporting us, because we're getting the message out there on this kind of stuff where it's not happening elsewhere in the mainstream. Please like, share, comment below. Throw us a few bucks on Patreon if you can afford it.